YouTube, Ninja Midget here. This is going to be a video on the assembly of the Mossberg 151, the Model 151K. So, let me go ahead and get my focus adjusted here. Well, first of all, things you're going to need for this step. You're going to need your cartridge stop. That's this little guy right here. Your cartridge stop spring, and of course your feeding tube. Now on this, I'm using a little bit of copper anti-seize because this is not exactly machined to high tolerances. It's really kind of rough inside here. Let me get this all focused here. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is there are two grooves, or two little holes, right up inside here. Let's get something to point with. They're right up inside here. You can't really see them on camera that well, but there's two little holes at the ends of this spring. Oops, stop banging the camera down. And these two little pins are going to go into on this spring. So it takes a little fiddling around. You get one side in, then you got to kind of mess with the other side to get the other side in. See if I can do it on camera here. It keeps popping out on me. If it gets to be too lengthy, I'll just chop it down and just edit it in post. Okay, well, I will have cut most of that out because it really took me a little while to get these in there, but there it is. Keep bumping the camera here, sorry about that. Okay, that's where those go, and it ends up just like this. Now, because, as I said, this is really kind of a rough, fitting in there, I like to use anti-seize on parts like this where it might not operate as smoothly with just grease. So I put some anti-seize in here, all the contacting surfaces. And then this is really simple. What you want to do is you're going to put this in first, and it doesn't matter which way it goes, but you're going to slide it in like that, and you can see the springs under there. Then what you do is you can get a small Phillips head or a flathead screwdriver, just lift this up to the point where it'll get past that, and then you'll be able to slide it down. It's kind of a delicate process, but you can twist that spring up to the point where it'll just barely clear the top of this, and then there we go. You've got that all captured now. So your cartridge stop and your cartridge stop spring are in and good to go. And the if you're interested, the anti-seize that I'm using, the copper anti-seize, is just a Loctite brand. Nothing special. Okay, so that's the feeding tube all assembled. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and we're going to assemble a bolt. The parts you're going to need for this: the firing pin, the main bolt body, the hammer spring, the retracting spring rod, retracting spring plunger, and of course your pin that's going to hold it all together. Now, items that you're going to need for this: you're going to need your hammer. Items that help: having these locking pliers is really helpful. It's not necessary, but it makes things much more simple. And these, everybody's seen these bench blocks for pistols and whatever that have these kind of cutouts on them, really do help for putting things like this together. So that helps. Not necessary. Really, all you need is a hammer for this. So, how this all goes together. First of all, here's your post that this is going to go on, your retracting rod, and this goes on just like this, locks up there. The next thing you're going to want to put on is going to be your hammer spring. It's going to go on just like that. Your hammer needs to go on in this orientation, so that this hard edge right here is going through, is going to the back, and then this rod goes right through. The next thing you're going to want to put on hold on a second here, getting a little ahead of myself. The first thing you're going to want to do is put your firing pin in. And that is really easy. This angled part goes down and it matches up with this right here. The first thing you're going to want to do is use some of whatever grease you use. Just put some of that on there. It doesn't need to be excessive, but you want to do that on both sides. That of course is going to make your pin slide in there easier, but it's also going to help make it easier to put together, because it's not going to be sliding around on you. That grease kind of acts as a something to hold it in place while you're working on it, so it's not sliding around on you too much. So that's that. There we go. And now to put this in, all you're going to do is you're going to slide it in the back at an angle like this, so that it gets under those areas that are peened over, and slides right up into place just like this. And the grease should hold that in while we are working on getting this together. So that's your firing pin in and ready. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is get your assembly here. You got your hammer spring on, you got to compress that a little bit, and then you're going to need to put on your retracting spring. And this is where it's going to get tricky. What you need to do the thing that worked for me with this is you've got this little piece right here that you can put your locking pliers on, and what that makes it easy to do is you can line up this hole. Let me see if I can, let me zoom in a little bit here, so, or focus a little closer to the camera so I can show it a little better here. There we go. So you've got this hole in the end of it. This hole right here. And that's going to be where your pin is going to go through that and hold that captive. And doing that just by itself is kind of a pain in the neck. So what I found is easy is get that hole lined up so that it's at approximately the right angle you're going to need it at. Put your locking pliers on, not too tight because you don't want to mar this up. Then what you're going to want to do is put everything in. Unless this doesn't like to go that way. I didn't think that there was one particular way. I think maybe one side of the spring is a little out of whack. So yeah, that slides in. And you're going to want to look to see when you've got it all the way in. And you'll be able to tell actually, why don't we just do this the smart way? Start off with a toothpick. Shoot. A little bit of a pain here.
Dad, you want one of these?
No thank you, Delaney. Not right now. Kids. Anyway, easiest way to do this, put a toothpick in there, hold it, clip off the end. From there, you can get your pin started easy enough. Use a punch to kind of push it through just a tad so that you can get your pin started in there. Of course it's not going to work with me now. Well, that would be just too easy. Anyway, clip off the other side of that so that I can mount it in my block here. Straight like that. I can now take the tension off of that spring. And there you go. Now, there. Focused. Okay, now start tapping your pin in. And there you go. Knocked out the other side. There's your pin. Everything is captive now. You got your firing pin.
Dad, you want the rest of this?
No thank you, Gavin. Oh, kids wanting to share. So anyway, that is your bolt assembly. A little tricky, and can be a little bit of a pain, but just the main thing to do is use a toothpick in there to get it started, to get everything together, then punch in your pin over the top of that, and you should be fine. It's a little bit of a pain, but not too bad. You want to make sure that this pin is not sticking out at all on either side. And that is your bolt assembly. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our ejector in, and then our sear and disconnector. We're going to get that whole area put together. So things you need is your disconnector, your sear pin, your disconnector pin, disconnector bracket, the two screws that hold that on. This is the breech plug spring. It goes on the back, and this is the sear spring and disconnector spring. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go on the left side of the gun, and you're going to want to get your disconnector in place. And to do that, you're just going to tap that in place until that little lip on there goes into the groove. And it wants to jump out on you, so one of the easiest ways to do this is to see if you can get a good couple medium hard taps on it to get it started. Can be a little tricky because it does want to jump out on you, but just get it into that lip and then you're good to go there. Okay, now on this side, the first thing you're going to want to put in is your sear. It goes in just like this, so this angle is toward the rear. Then you're going to want to get your pin in there, just like that.
What is the problem now?
Oh, wonderful. Kids fighting, isn't it grand? Anyway, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to put on your disconnector bracket, and you need to make sure that it's going on with the short side facing forward. Okay, so after that, what you want to do is you want to lay your sear and disconnector spring straight on over this first hole. You're going to take one of your screws, your screwdriver. It's much easier if your screwdriver is magnetized, and you're going to screw that down in there. Now you want to hold on to this part of the spring because it will want to wander on you as you're tightening this down. And you want it at least roughly centered on your sear. So that's that. Now here's your disconnector. Your disconnector is going to go in just behind the sear, like this. You're going to need to put a little bit of downward pressure on the disconnector to get the pin in. That slides in. The last thing you want to put together on this, the last thing you want to do is you're going to put on your breech plug spring over this back hole, and then you're just going to go ahead and screw this down right here. And then that's it. That's your sear and disconnect system all set up, and your ejectors in. So this is good to go now. The next thing you want to do is you're going to get your charging handle. You're going to slide the bolt in so that these machined sides are toward the bottom of the gun. You're going to just slide that whole thing in. You're going to line up the hole so that you can get your pin in here, and there's cutout on the pin so that it'll slide in and then it'll go into this groove as the bolt slides forward. And from there you want to go ahead and put your breech plug on and screw in your bolt. And there you have your completed bolt assembly. Check functionality. Cocks. Functions fine. And there you go. You got your bolt and your disconnect and your sear assembly all together. Now ready for the next. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and put the stock together. And this is probably going to be a little difficult to film because it's just kind of awkward working with this stock underneath the camera, but I'll try to get as much as I can in the shot nice and clear. First thing you're going to want to do is get your trigger in. Now your trigger spring right here is going to go in just like this. This is the trigger facing forward, front of the gun's going this way, and you're going to want to put it inside the two posts on your trigger, and then it's going to go in right like that. You want these posts down here. What they're going to do is they're going to lock in on this as you put tension on that. Now one of the things that helps with getting this in is using some long piece of wood like this. I've got these little cotton things that I'll use for cleaning and stuff. These are really good for getting it in and then getting something in there so that you can push the pin in. And I probably will need to hammer the pin in on this because I did steam the stock when I was refinishing it, and that makes the wood puff up a little bit. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to have your spring just like this, and you're going to drop this down inside, and you want to grab the trigger on the bottom with your hand so you can guide it into position as you're pushing this piece through. And this can be kind of a pain in the butt to get that in there, and the spring wants to jump out on you because it's catching on the sides. But if you wiggle it around, there it goes. Okay, now that's your spring in, and it's loose right now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put some spring tension on that. But first things first, now that you've got this in, you can go ahead and you're going to tap in your pin, your trigger pin, get it started, and then you want to grab the trigger from the bottom because you might need to wiggle it around so it gets into the hole, and it usually will go in pretty nicely. Once you've got the first one in, it usually taps in pretty easily on the other side. You want to watch if you have a new finish like mine. I just finished refinishing this stock. You want to watch and make sure that you're not damaging your nice new finish. So get that in there. Okay, so that's just in there perfectly now. Okay, so there's your trigger. But now, the problem that we have here is no spring tension on the trigger. So this is where you're going to need something like this, some angled or hooked tool that you can use to put some spring tension on there, because what happens is your feeding tube is what's going to provide your spring tension. So you're going to want to take out your the inside of your feeding tubes. Oops, banging the camera again. You're going to want to take out the inside of your feeding tube, and sorry about that, I'll get the camera stopped shaking here. So what you're going to do, and I'll try to get this on camera as well as I can, you're going to want to, from the underside, you're going to want to hook that spring, and you're going to pull it back. It's a little bit of a pain. So you want to hook that spring at an angle, and you're going to want to pull it down, and it keeps wanting to jump out on you. It's a little bit of a pain. I may have to do this off camera. I'm bouncing around, smacking the camera again like an idiot. Alright. The whole idea for this is you want to get that spring under tension down there so that you can put the feeding tube in. I'm going to do this off camera because this is just going to be a pain in the butt for me. Alright, so it takes a little fiddling around with it. I hope I explained it well enough, but you're going to need to get that spring hooked down underneath the feeding tube. So you can put the feeding tube through, and it goes through the center of your trigger underneath your trigger pin, and then that is what gives you your spring tension for your trigger. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is we got to get our spring tensioner hooked up, and there's a little groove underneath, a machined groove underneath the feed tube that this is going to hook into, and if you move it around, you'll be able to feel when it hooks into that little groove up underneath your feed tube. After that, you're going to want to go ahead and grab your shortest wood screw is the one that's going to hold this spring in. So you're going to want to get your Phillips head screwdriver, and you're going to just go ahead and screw that in. And that is what's going to keep your feed tube in the right position. Banging the camera again. The right position so that you're not going to have this bouncing around, and it kind of squirted out on me. See that? That's interesting. Oops. I'll have to watch that a little bit. It looks like maybe it wasn't quite in there the way it should be. So, let me see there. Okay. So that's something to watch, is that it looks like maybe sometimes it wants to squirt out on you there and come out of that groove. So after this is down in place and tight, you want to make sure that this is not going anywhere. You shouldn't have any play in here. And there you go. Now, I'm going to want to thread this in. There you go. Now, you just put your action in. Fits right on top. And screw it in place. There we go. So there you have it. And you check the trigger function. Bolts functioning fine. Before you go any further, the last thing you want to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to put your trigger guard on. Of course, it helps if you can find it. My desk is a mess. Anyway, the trigger guard needs to go on. That's the last part. I don't think I need to show anybody how to do that. Your main gun is put together and good to go. Okay, so that completes the reassembly of the Model 151K Turned out really nice. The stock has been completely refinished. I did the mahogany stain on that, which really made the wood grain pop out nicely. Looks really, really good now. Got the old scope that it came with back on it, just because it's a cool old looking gun. So that's cool. Got that all together. Now there are 3 additional videos at the end of this, and those are videos that explain how the hammer and the sear interact, as well as the feeding and ejection system, and how the trigger and the sear and disconnector function together. So if you're interested in seeing a little bit about how the gun functions, then you can go ahead and watch on. But other than that, that is the complete full assembly of the Mossberg Model 151K. Thanks for watching. Okay, YouTube, I just wanted to explain a little bit of the functionality behind how the sear connects and interacts with the hammer. This being the hammer. Get the hammer spring in here. I just have this temporarily put together. You can see in there there's a toothpick. Toothpicks are great little tools to use when you want to assemble a gun, just to check functionality. They're real simple. You just use some snippers to cut them down flush. They're real easy to push out. So I have this assembled for that purpose, just to explain how the sear interacts with the hammer and how this part of the gun functions. Now, here's your sear, and this goes in the gun just like this. So that part forward, this part is back, and this is the part. This part right here is what interacts with the hammer. That is what holds your hammer, and the rest of this rides in this groove up here as the action functions. So you have a downward pressure on this side with the sear spring, and that is grabbing this as the bolt swings forward and pushing it. So you want to note that hard angle there. That's what we're looking at, because I'm going to put this in the rifle here. Just put the bolt in there like so. Find your little hole where your charging pin goes. Put that in there, and I'm going to go ahead and just give this a few turns, the cap, the breech plug, just so that it's going to stay in there, it's not flying out on me. And now, okay, so I've got my little test set up here. Let's see if I can get this here. Yeah, there we go. There's our test setup. Now, the bolt goes forward. It's always all the way in the forward position now. Let's see if I can get this on camera. So the bolt's going to come back, and you have your sear that is now on the bolt, or on the hammer, excuse me. You can see in there, you can't see the hammer. So what's happening is the sear spring is pushing down on this, ensuring that that engagement happens when the bolt moves forward. So this is pushed down. It is now actually holding the hammer. It's engaged there. And you can tell because you cannot see the hammer in here. Get some more light on that. You can't see the hammer down in there. But if you go ahead and you take and you push this down, watch this. Of course, it's not going to work for me. Hello. Oh, it has to be all the way forward in the locked position. So you push forward on your handle just a bit. That's where it's going to be locked, and then there's your hammer. So that is how this is functioning. And then your bolt, you see your hammer in there. This is your hammer right here. There's that hard surface, that hard angle, I should say. So your bolt's going to come back, and you see that hammer come back into this position right here. And that position right there, you can still see that little lip of the hammer. That's where the sear drops down, and that engages that surface as the bolt comes back forward, stripping off another round. The sear captures that hammer and holds it there until the bolt's all the way in the forward position, and the sear is depressed on this side, which releases the hammer. So I just wanted to do a little bit of that functionality, just because I was really studying and looking at this gun for how this functions. Very interesting design. So I'm going to do more of these kinds of videos on this gun. My next will be the feed tube, and show how that works when the bolt's in the gun. And I will do another video on that. Okay, this is going to be the feeding and ejection system for the Mossberg 151K. That's what this video is about. I have my bolt installed just with no springs, just to be able to show how this functions, how this operates. And let me see, get a good view of those ramps there. Yeah. Okay, so what we're looking at is how the feeding mechanism works. First, let me show you. This is our magazine tube, and I've got some ammo in there. I don't have any firing pin in the bolt or anything, so it's perfectly safe. And this is your cartridge stop. Let me get this out of the way here. This is your cartridge stop, this piece right here. So what happens is, as this comes forward as the bolt comes forward, it pushes this, and then that allows one bullet to come out, and then it captures the next one. So this is your feeding system, and these points right here, these are what is making a connection with this area right here. You can tell those wear lines. So that's how that's functioning and feeding one round through at a time. And when you see these, of course, that's where you want to put some grease. When you're assembling the gun, you want to make sure that you have those greased up so it's functioning smoothly. Now, how this functions is really interesting. What happens is, you've got these, let me show you these first. These tabs right here on the front and back of this part of the feeding system. And those tabs fit right inside these grooves right here. So you have that just sitting right there. That's what it's like. That's what it looks like when the gun is assembled. Now, I'm going to put some pressure on this so I can hold it and pull the bolt back. Okay, so the bolt's back. Now the bolt's going to come forward, and it's going to push up on this right here, and it's going to, you'll hear a click as a round comes out. There, hear that click? Now, as the bolt comes back, you're going to be able to see this round being released, and watch what happens. Of course it didn't work. Normally, that will jump right up in there. That round will just jump right up in there under that spring tension. That one must have got a little bit caught. But anyway, so after that, you got you can't see it, but the shell is in there. Your bolt's going to come forward. It's going to grab onto the shell, and it's going to, you've got your extractor that's got it captive, and you see up in this area, you're starting to see your extractor. That's your extractor right there. So as it comes back, it's making that connection with the extractor, and that's what's going to flip out your spent casing. So now I want to see if I can get this to jump up in here, because it was really cool how it was doing that when I had this thing testing it a little while ago. So out comes your round, and then see how that just jumped right in there? That's cool. So yeah, it jumps right in there. Really well designed feeding system. Goes forward, captures the bullet, dump the one out that was spent in there, and then it's going to bring it back, hit the ejector, boom, out she goes. So that's how the feeding and ejection system on this gun works. Pretty interesting design, and it seems to work really well. I can only assume that under normal firing circumstances this thing is going to work pretty well, because it seems to work pretty well when I'm just fiddling around with it here on my workbench. So anyway, that's just the functionality of the feeding system. I thought I'd give a little bit on that, and I'm not sure if there's much more to this gun, but if there is, I'll be doing another video on that. Thanks for watching. Okay, last little update on the functionality of the Mossberg 151K. Now I've got everything together here, and the one thing that I didn't understand was how the trigger functions. So I've got the trigger here, and I'm going to go ahead and cock the bolt back. Now the hammer's cocked. Now this is not ready to fire yet, and the reason is because it has not, the trigger hasn't reset. So the trigger goes in this way, and as you're pushing forward on the trigger spring is pushing that back. It's pushing this pin, let me see, pushing this pin this way toward the back of the gun. And what that does is that pulls down your disconnect, and there's your trigger reset right there. Just reset the trigger. Now as you start pulling the trigger, it starts pushing this pin forward, which pushes your sear down, and there's your full cycle of your trigger. And then your bolt comes back, cocks it again, trigger reset, trigger pull. So that is the last bit of functionality for this gun. I can't think of anything else that I don't understand the way it functions. It seems like a simple design, but a very good, straightforward design that just works. So that's the last update. I don't see any more videos for this. It just seems like there's no more that could really be told about this gun. But there you have it, the last bit of how the Mossberg 151K functions. Thanks for watching.